Hello everybody, Brett Tadlock, TN Artist here. So just wanted to jump in and show you today's painting that we're going to be working towards here in Rebelle 7 Pro. This painting and this lesson is designed to really work with somebody that's just kind of getting started with digital painting. Perhaps you've never painted before and wanted to give it a try. Perhaps you're a seasoned artist and you're just trying to figure out something like Rebelle and how to use it. So I'm going to walk you through this step by step and kind of show you how to set up your canvas, how to prepare everything, how to work on everything, so that way you can kind of navigate through it. But basically I want to show you how to prepare, how to apply all the different stuff that we're doing, and then leave it up to you to what style you want to create. So I'm not doing this necessarily for you to recreate this exact painting, but for you to be able to create a painting of your own that you can work on. So hopefully this will give you all the steps and everything else you need for it. So let's jump right into it, okay? By the way, if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. And if you're on Patreon, one of my patrons, make sure to share it with other people. They can join for free and watch there. And they can also help support if they want to do that as well. But for those of you that are patrons, I super appreciate you. So when you launch Rebelle 7 Pro, you're going to always get this pop-up screen here unless you click this little button here, but I don't recommend clicking it. So this is where you can pick your canvas size. I tend to work 10 by 8 or 8 by 10 and anywhere from 150 to 200 dpi. I could go more. You can click here to go all the way up to 600. 600 is really way more than you're ever going to need. 300 is kind of the industry standard for printing. The reason I do it at 250 or 150, it's creating less resources, using less resources for the computer. And I can always use nanopixel export to upsize it, so I can go from 200 to 300. But most of the time I print, when I do my prints, they're 16 by 20. So if I just double this with the nanopixel export, I get clean, crisp exports, and they print just fine. So, and they look great. Matter of fact, when you print it on some nice matte paper, you can't tell that it wasn't done with traditional medium. And then sometimes I take those and just will go back in and ink over them or add highlights and different kind of stuff. So anyway, 150 to 200 dpi. You can set landscape or portrait, whichever one you want to do. Okay, we're going to do a landscape, so we'll stick with landscape. And then over here you can select your canvas. And so these are the pre-set ones that you get with Rebelle. Anything from aquarelle through hot pressed, which is more of a standard watercolor, to white simple, which is just flat. There's no real texture. And the washi and all so forth. So I'm going to stick with the hot pressed. I like that texture. It's just enough tooth to it to make it interesting, but just enough, but not enough to distract. Okay, you can use deckled edges. So if you use deckled edges, it means that the edges are going to have a ripped texture around it, and so all the ones that are available to use that with are these right here. Okay, and so it really lets you pick those and go with those. I'll go ahead and use deckled edges. Now the one thing with that is when you export it, make sure to export it as a PNG with transparent background. Okay. So that way if you go to print it, you can have it show that deckled edge on the print. So that way, even if it's a, say like a 16 by 20 print and you've got a 1/4 inch border all the way around, it still can look nice for it. So it's if you want to use it, but you can always come back and change that if you wanted to and move it around, because that's just, it simply just takes the edges and adds that deckled border. Up here are the canvas colors, so you can go with white, the default. So this one is just a little off-white. You can see here, if it was all white, these would be 255, 255, and so forth. All of these would be 255, and so it'd be pure white. So don't really recommend pure white unless you just really want to. I like to not have it pure white, so that way if I use pure white for my highlights, it just looks cleaner and better. So just whatever you want to go with here. You can go a little bit cooler side, you can stay on the warmer side. It's not a huge difference, but it's just a slight one. So tell it OK. You can also go with colors if you're going to have a primary color in your background. Like say if you were doing like a space or nighttime scene or something like that, you could go with some of these darker edges, or portrait and you wanted more of the tans and so forth. So you can have all those there. So I'm just going to leave it like this and click OK. And so I've got it 8x10 landscape, 200 dpi, and the hot pressed. If you want to have it record and do a time lapse, you can always click this button right here and it will do the time lapse. You can also click record settings, and by default it will put it in your usually users and videos. If you got to be careful with that because it will eat up a lot of space quickly. So totally up to you if you do it or not, but just be careful and aware of where you're putting it. But you can click this and change the destination of it. So, and then it has the resolution and everything here, so you can go like if you're doing a YouTube video, 1080 by 1920 or 1920 by 1080, and have that all set up to go here. Okay, but I'm not going to use it, so I'm just going to click cancel and then tell this OK. All right, so now we have this canvas. Over here for our palette, I've just got the default colors here. You can click X on that. Visual settings, if you want to have that open and play around with the settings, you can. The main thing you want to do is go down and make sure that this nanopixel is turned on. That'll allow you to do the paper texture and to export nanopixel export. And then over here, I like to use color pigments. So turn that on. It gives you more of a natural look to your painting, so more real world results and kind of overview. And then you've got your brushes and everything else up here. You can click between them. We're going to try and stick mostly with the watercolor tool. And stencils and then properties. So like for example, if I click on one of the brushes here, like that, and then click on properties, I can now see what properties I am using. So I'm going to slide this up so I have a little bit more space. If we use stencils, you can always import them from your stencil library or create a new one and so forth. So that's all there. I don't know if we'll use those or not in this one. So that way we've got all of it laid out. And there are some, these are, for the most part, a lot of these are the standard brushes. I have a few of mine in here. If you want to get my brush set, you can do so on Gumroad or on Patreon. So that is all available there. Okay. So let's look at going through some of these, getting this all set up to go. So I'm going to, we're going to lay in a sky color. And I want to show you kind of a little bit of how I'm going to lay this out. We're going to use some of the digital painting stuff, but then also the watercolor stuff, because the advantage of this is being able to kind of live in both worlds. That's one of the great things about Rebelle. All right, so I'm not going to wet my canvas. If I wanted to, I could come over here and just click this and wet the layer, wet all visible layers, or dry the layer. I haven't done anything to it, so it's dry. If you ever want to check it, you just click this little icon here, and it'll show you where the canvas is wet. It'll turn it a light blue, and then you can see where the wetness is on it, and then play around. So I'm going to turn that off. So what I want to do here is I want to start off with maybe a soft orange. So let's come over here. We're going to click on this orange, and we're going to click into here, and let's go with like so. So it's going to give us this kind of peachy orange. Okay, so it's FFA07A, and we'll tell that OK. And let's come over here and we're going to grab our fill bucket. We're going to go to gradient, and let's pick one of these down here. We'll play around with a little bit. It's gradient 10. So if we click on that and click here, this is where we can put in for our same stuff. So I'm having issues with my keyboard, so I got to double check it. A07A. Tell it OK. And then We'll go with a soft yellow for the mid-tone here. For this, we're going to go with FFF 5BA. Okay. And then for this color here, we'll click on it. Let's make that a little bit more of a lavender color. And that'll be E6, E6, FA. Just like that. Okay. So that's going to give us the colors we need for starting off with our sky. And we could even add, well, let's just go with this. So we don't need this open anymore. We can grab and see where everything is going to be. Now I'm going to turn this around because I always forget that. And whenever these jagged lines are there, you want to kind of put those there and let go. Now we can grab this again and turn it around. So now that's pretty much straight up and down. We can grab it. There we go. And let's bring this up. And now we have the beginnings of kind of a cool light. All right. I'll tell you what. Let's kind of bring that back around. This is one of the nice things about playing around with this, is that you can kind of get an idea of what you want it to look like before you commit to it. And I'm thinking maybe something like that. And I'm going to bring this down a little bit like so. Okay. And we'll go ahead and hit enter, and that commits it. All right. Now you can even hit T if you want to play around with this, and then use your mouse wheel to scroll out, but then grab the bottom of this if you want to kind of bring that up a little bit so it's a little bit closer together. Maybe something like that. Hit enter. And I want to add, I'm going to grab the airbrush on the soft spray. We're going to turn the opacity down to maybe about 20. Okay. Bring the size up right about there. And let's come over here and click on this. I want to add a pale blue. So we'll go with ADD 8E6. Tell it OK. Now I'm going to press Shift, and then I'm going to come over, and you see that kind of snaps to a horizontal line. And once I've got it there, I'm going to click, and I'm using my mouse right now. You can use your pen. I'm going to click and hold, and just kind of drag across, and it will stay within that straight line. I'm going to click again and come across. Got that lighter blue. Now I'm going to come up here. I'm going to go to Filter. I'm going to go to Gaussian Blur. Just about every program has a Gaussian Blur. And I'm only going to bring that up maybe just 16, maybe 20% until it apply. All right. So now we've got that there. Now we can come over here. I'm going to look at my tilt. So my tilt is off. That's why it's grayed out. If I click on it, it'll turn it blue. And now what this has done, this has raised this end and lowered this end. So if I put anything wet here, it's going to run down the canvas. So this is your tilt. So this is kind of the, whatever direction this arrow points right here, this line, that's the direction it's tilting. Okay. The further out it is, the higher that the other opposite side is raised. All right. So, but I'm checking to make sure it's off. That's what I'm doing. I do recommend having the navigator up if you don't have another monitor. And now we can see about maybe wetting the layer. And now if we go down to here you can see it's that light blue I was telling you about. So if you ever see this, you're like, oh, everything's blue. Just look to see if your water is on. There we go. All right. So I have that on there. It's dissipating ever so slightly. I can even come in here and click on my water if I want to make it a little bit more. Press Shift, go straight over, just like that. You can turn the water off so I can see it. It's going to gradient those together just like if it was real pigment. Okay, let's see how it's starting to run it together. Add a little bit more at the top. And it's always going to kind of flush out from the middle out. Okay, so now what I can do is I can compare to filter. I can Gaussian blur again. And that's going to give me that smoothness and see all of that. So if you want those colors to kind of streak together a little bit, you can do all this. If you don't like it, just Control Z. And then just to make sure you can dry the layer. Okay, I kind of like these. I'm going to Gaussian blur that one more time. And there we go. Okay. So pretty simple on that. Great way to kind of lay in where you want your sky to be. Now I'm going to add a water line, horizon line, and I think I want the darkest part to be right there where that little bit darker orange is. And I've still got that blue selected here. So I've got this selected. I'm going to hit delete. Actually, I'm going to hit delete, and that's going to delete that. And now I'm going to go Control D. And so far I've just been using my mouse. So I've not had to really use my stylus yet. So I'm going to right click on the layer. I'm going to duplicate the layer. And I'm going to, oops, clipping mask. I'm going to hit T. And come over here and flip vertically and line that back up just like so. I'm going to zoom this out, move it, oops, and click it, not commit it. Let's try that again. Control T, flip vertical, hold Shift down, drag it straight down just till those meet. Now I'm going to come over here and click Deform. And this is a very subtle thing, but it does kind of help. And what I'm doing is changing the perspective. There's actually one here that is specifically for perspective, so if you just want to make your life easier, you can do it that one, but I just always used to using Deform for it because it's basically the same thing. So, yeah, potato, potato. All right. So there we go with that. Click Enter. Press T, a couple up arrows, Control D. Bring it down a little bit. There we go. Now we have a reflection. Again, very subtle with what I just did, but it is still there. Okay, so now what we want to do, now that we've kind of got that laid in here, and if we come back in, if we hit the point button, we can see a full screen. If we hit 0, we can see some of the watercolor paper texture that's in there, and that's fine. I like to keep it at this level because it's kind of standing back from it. I'm going to right click here. I'm going to merge the layers just like so, and I'm going to Gaussian blur one more time. There we go. Okay. So that kind of softens it out and gives you a little bit better of a look. And now the next thing we want to do is see about putting in some of our composition. So I am going to create a new layer. I'm going to wet the layer. So now this layer is wet. Okay. If I look down here on this one, you can see that it's not. See, that light blue didn't kick on. But if I come up here and click on that one, you can see that it is wet. Okay. So it's just damp paper. It's almost like I just sprayed a water bottle on it. So now some of the things we can do, and I don't need this on because I know this layer is wet, is we can come back over to our watercolor brush. All right. And we can start kind of figuring out where we want to lay in some color. All right. Now I'm going to click right here on my history. And I didn't keep the other ones. Okay. Well, I can press I and select what I want. And I'm going to select this purplish color here. I'm going to select here. I'm going to come down just a little bit so it's darker. I press B to go back to my brush. And I can lay in where I want to put some clouds. Now this is wet. My brush has water in it. I can change how much water is here. You'll notice that you can see the brush icon appear over here. You can see the more water it gets, the redder it gets. It gives you kind of a little bit of an icon there to view. I'm only going to put, like 10 or 11 water, so it's just slightly damp brush. And I think I'm going to go with like the fan brush, for example. I'm also going to press this pause diffusion right here. So this will let me put down the pigment, but not have it react with the water that's on the canvas yet. So I can really kind of control it. So I'm just going to kind of come in. And the reason I like using this fan brush is that it's really, see how it kind of twists and turns as you lay it in there? That's what I want. I want this to lay in, and its opacity is turned down to 50%, so I can kind of just let it do its little twisty turny thing and play around with the value. Remember, value is light to dark, hue is the color. Okay, so I can get that kind of laid in. I'm doing this on a separate layer because I don't want to interact with this bottom layer just yet. And I want to come across for a little bit more dynamic sky, something along these lines. Okay, I'm going to click on this again. I'm going to come over here and just add a little bit more pigment going over towards the purple side. Bring some of that in. Build up with just that slight purple. Okay, now this one was, just to show you again, 938DA6. So what I do is with other paintings, if I paint some of these things and I like how it looks, I try to make a note of the hex codes. Okay, so that's where I'm getting the hex codes from that I was telling you earlier. So now we're just going to bring this in, thinking a little bit about the shape that we want, but mainly just kind of the color, the direction. So not overly worried about the cloud shapes at the moment, but just kind of the general idea. Okay. If that starts getting a little too random on you, you can always switch over to something like the filbert, the dry. Again, you want to, every time you change, it's going to remember what your last brush setting was. So if you change over, you can lower that down a little bit. It'll have less water. You can change the opacity. I'm just kind of getting some of the rough shapes in here. Very much just rough. And play around like these gouache brushes. I think these are kind of cool. I'm going to bring that opacity up a little bit. Bring the water down. So you can definitely get some interesting. Now gouache is going to be more opaque by itself, and so this is going to be stylized to be more opaque than some of these other watercolor brushes are. Okay, so just trying to get these laid in. Get a feel for it. Nothing crazy yet. And I'm remembering that this is these paints are going to bloom when I unpause it. So it's because the layer's wet. So as soon as I unpause it, they're going to bloom out. And so I'm just trying to keep some of the colors. And the darker it is, the more times I go over it, the more it's going to bring that bloom around. Okay, so I'm going to click on here. I'm going to come back over towards the blue side, even maybe go up a little bit. So I'm adding more hue to it, more hue here, but my value is staying the same. We're going to add in just a little bit through here. Maybe a few spots through here as well. Because remember, this is again going to naturally bloom out like watercolors do. A little bit of that, and I'm going to grab a little bit of this orange. I want this to be kind of reflected up in here, like it's catching some of that light, like so. We can even bring this up into some of the lighter area, because again, I'm not interacting with what's down here in my gradient, so I can really play around and change it if I decide that I don't like it. That is the advantage of this, is that you have all the playing, all the fun of watercolor, but all the ability to not have to worry about it. I don't have to drag out my paints. I don't have to feel precious about the paper. I can do all those things, but at the same time have a really nice relaxing experience. Okay, bring some of that in there. More. All right, now here's where the fun happens. So I'm going to unpause this and I'm going to keep an eye on it. I can use D to pause. So if you look here, it says pause diffusion and then it says D in parentheses. That means I can use on my keyboard. I can press the letter D to pause it again. If I hit F, it will dry it. Okay, so it'll instantly dry the layer, fast dry it. That's what F is fast dry. So fast dry, the difference between dry and fast dry. Dry is completely dry. It's like you've left the painting for a couple hours and the paper's dried out and everything else. Fast dry, the paper is damp, but the paints aren't going to bloom. Okay, they're not going to keep expanding and everything else. So that's what F does. So I'm going to press D. I'm going to watch this and I'm going to see if it gets to a point that I like it, and then I'll press D again. So let's see what it does. Pressing D. Look at it go. All right, now press D again because I want to kind of control how some of this is blooming out. All right, so now I can come over here to my sponge, okay, and I'm going to go with this spatter. So here's what I want to do with my sponge. So this is kind of cool. I'm going to bring that size down on the sponge, and I'm just going to sponge some of it dry. Okay, so all this area through here is going to now be a splotchy dry, and it's going to make this paint have to really interact with itself more. Okay, because Rebelle does a fantastic job of doing it, but it's not perfect. You know, it's a simulation, but it does a really cool job of it. Bring that up a little bit. Just come along here. Again, I'm not affecting any of the pigment other than the fact I'm just drying the water. Okay, I'm just mopping some of it up, if you will. There we go. And I'm going to come along through here as well. And just kind of mop this up through here. And I chose this one because it's leaving all these little grainy aspects. See all those spots? That's where it's drying it. Okay. And so I want that. I'm wanting it to kind of break up and not be so straight lined. Okay. Come in here a little bit. This one is also pressure sensitive, so you'll notice the harder I push, the more it expands out. Alright, so let's turn off the water view. And let's press D again. Let some of that really kind of bloom out. Now see where it's hitting the edges of where I dried it? I'm getting a lot more broken up stuff here. Okay, and we can come back and really play around with this, but this is just the first pass. And see what it does and see kind of the feeling that we get. But see how it's really organic, and you can have the nice foundation for playing with stuff and doing stuff. So this is a great way to start and really kind of control it. If you were doing this regular watercolor, you're going to have to fight the angles and the spread and everything else. With this, excuse me. With this, I don't really have to. But instead, I can now come in, take my watercolor brush. Now I can come in and grab, say, maybe this round. Now when I grabbed it, the opacity went up, the water went up. I'm going to bring the water back down a little bit. 14, 15, not super precise. I'm also going to go with 1, which is just paint. 2 is paint and mix. 3 is paint and blend. 4 is just blend, and 5 is erase. Okay. What that would mean is that if I'm layering these and I want to interact with the paint more, I can by using these other ones. or I can just lay down paint. Right now I just want to lay down some pigment, so I'm just going to go with that. So I'm going to grab this purplish color. I'm going to bring that down to where it's a lot darker in hue. There's the hex code right there. All right. And now what I want to do is I want to drop some of this in and give it a chance to really play around. I don't think I necessarily want the texture I'm getting from this one, so I'm going to go with mop. Bring that opacity back up, drop the water back down. This one's really sensitive to pressure. I'll grab that blue a little bit. I'll grab this, but I'm going to go really up here and add some more purple. I don't think we're getting quite enough purple in here. Now I'm going to bring the size down so I'm not so much fighting it. And I'm just going to lay in a bit of a shape up through here as well. Really let that kind of play itself out. Get that bloom. Now I can push 4 and really kind of soften these. And just kind of encourage it. And still get some of that bloom. So let me zoom in here. So even though I'm pushing it around, I'm still going to get some of that bloom in. I'm going to press 1. Throw a little bit more color in here. Maybe even really increase the water so we get a lot more movement. There we go. Now the only problem with increasing the water is that it gets more transparent. But that's okay. We can keep building it up. Just like with watercolors. And see how that really hits that line of where we'd left that. That back down. Just add some pigment to that watery area. So now I'm not adding so much water to it, but I'm just adding pigment to it because it's already saturated and wet. So I don't need to add more water. I can just add more pigment. Okay. I can come over to blend. If I want to go with more of a broken up blend, I can just grab one of these grunge brushes or spatter brushes and just kind of push it around a little bit. Press period and zoom out. And if you've got it where you like it, you can come in here with just the water brush. Okay, so this is just water. I'm going to grab one of these grungy ones, lower that down. I'm going to turn off the water so I can kind of see. And when I said turn off the water, I meant like turn off seeing where it's wet. It's still wet. I didn't turn on, I didn't dry it. Okay. I'm going to press the B back over here. Keep this granulated brush. Bring the size down. Still got a decent amount of water in it. We'll bring the opacity up to 100. And then just kind of come around. Sprinkle in some blues and some purples. Let those diffuse. Come over some of the others. And again, just take your time, play around with adding in. Think about where it's going to be at. Let it really kind of do its thing. And it'll hit the dry areas and then it'll kind of bounce back usually. I'm going to press 4, come over here and really kind of soften some of these little dark spots. And let those just kind of diffuse out a little bit. to grab Alt, click on that paint here. That puts me back in 1. And come back in and add a little bit more in through here. Let it diffuse out. I can even go with a little bit of a spatter, because it gives kind of an interesting look. It's really random. I like using this one to really kind of get that cool effect. See how it just kind of hits together? To me, that just yells watercolor. It's totally up to you how much you want to control it. The gouache 2 works really good. We're just adding in more pigments, all we're doing. Let's see, by doing this, I haven't affected this down here. So if there's anything here I don't like, I can erase it here in just a second, and I'll show you that. Let me kind of get some of this where I like it a little bit more. Just checking where my water's at. Blooming that towards the edges. Go really dark up here. And then just a splash of color right there. Alright, so we're kind of getting to where I like it. I'm going to add in some more of this orange. Press D, deposit. I'm going to kind of soften that out. And soften some of that out. And this gouache liner 2 works really well for kind of blending. I like using the brushes to blend better than the blending tool, but that's a personal preference. Okay, so now I kind of have this where I want it for some of the look and the feel. But this graininess here is a little too grainy through here, and it looks more kind of like trees. It's kind of the feel. That's not what I want right here. So I'm going to zoom in, and I'm going to just kind of spin my brush, and I'm just doing circles along the edge here, and getting rid of some of those grains. It's still wet, so I can still play around with the diffusion, but I've paused the diffusion. A bit more of these colors kind of pushed around to where I like them. And maybe kind of on these bottom of the clouds, I like to do a stroke that's kind of like this. Kind of gives that feeling of an under. You're seeing it from the bottom. Again, this is up to you how much you want to do this. If you like the graininess of it, and it's at a level that you like, leave it. I'm not telling you exactly how to do it. I'm just showing you how I do it so you can learn from it and do it how you want to do it. And again, this brush responds to pressure. So the harder I press, the bigger the brush gets. So I've still got a lot of the blooming and stuff that was through here. but it's a bit more controlled. I'm going to leave this on fan on blend as well. I come in and break up some of these. Get across. And to me, it's always that fun fight between organic and controlled. Grab this flap. All right. Now there is another thing you can do, so I'm going to go ahead and fast dry this layer. Turn off D for pause. I'm going to go over to my selection tool, my freehand. Let me show you how you can do a little bit of controlled water here. So let's say, for example, I want to kind of have a cloud shape here. Something like that. Okay. Now I can come in here with my brush and opacity up and grab maybe, I don't know, this purplish color here. Just the edge. As long as I don't pick up my brush, the paint will not activate. And this is still damp in some of these areas. I will need to go down and touch the paint where it's there, so that way it let go. And I can come back in here and add a little bit more water. Get some of that blend. I didn't have quite enough water in the first one. Push 4. Just kind of soften out. And press F to fast dry it and pause it. And come over here to my water, grab the soft, bring that giant brush down on that edge. Don't have to be super specific with it. Let that diffuse out. You can grab the blow tool, push it around a little bit. Press F. It's messed up. Got a little bit away from me there. I can just come back to my brush here. Let's go with maybe the filbert dry. Just kind of soften some of that out. Bring that size down. So I was pushing this around and trying to capture some of the drips and the runs, but let it get away. But that's okay, because some of this can sometimes be interesting. If I don't like it, I just push 5 and I erase it. If I don't get a clean enough erase, I can go up to erase, use the actual eraser. The brush will leave a little bit of the pigment behind. The eraser will not usually. The less I press, it'll leave some. And come back to my brush. I can hit 4 and just kind of swirl some of that together. And then any other stuff that I don't really care for, I can just come back in and soften it out, just like so. Okay, so that's kind of an interesting shape, an interesting little jump there. Okay. Now then, push some of this pigment up. Shape out some of these clouds a little bit. Maybe kind of bring them around like so. out some of these areas. Push some of these back a little bit. Even grab my selection tool, so if there's some of these out this area. And just delete it, Control D. I can really kind of erase out some of that stuff. Go back to my mop or any of my others and just kind of soften it out. And if you want, you can always bring in some of the water, because that dries the area. And really, you can go ahead, you can dry it anyway if you wanted to. The layers. Now the whole thing's dry. Along this edge, soften itself out. All I'm doing is adding some water. And you'll see that just kind of lets the pigment move around a little bit more. A cool way to play around with the color. Go with liner. Grab a little bit of that orange into where it's wet. A little purple. Drop it in where it's wet. All right. And, what if you look at this and you're like, hey, it's too dark. I want this to be softer. Well, that's why we did it on another layer. So you can just come over here and soften it out by just reducing the opacity. Okay. All right. So let's go to our next layer. We're going to grab our selection tool. And then what we're going to look at is clicking on the Add To. I'm going to just kind of come in across and down. Let's add a little bit more, okay? Like that. And I'm going to grab this dark color here. We can go to Airbrush. We can stick with Watercolor, but I'm just going to kind of add that in at the top. Bring that size down. Like so. Come over here to my clouds. Those. Maybe go a little bit more purple. Like so. And we can wet that if we want, overly wet it. Let that kind of interact. Grab our airbrush. Oops. I meant to click one. Have this bright color here. I'm going to come down a little bit more white to it. I'm going to go with the airbrush. I'm going to do shift, come straight across. My purple. I'll bring this down with the left brackets. Press 4. Just kind of soften those together. A darker edge. And kind of letting this fade off. I press F to fast try, Control D. Go down to my cloud layer. And really soften that out. These just kind of disappear into each other. I'm jumping back and forth between the layers. Something like that. That size down. I just want to kind of bring that direction so there's a little bit more of a direction flow. Like so. There we are. Alright, so what I want to do here is go with my selection tool again. Kind of come in through here. I'll go to Filter, Gaussian Blur. We'll leave it at the 20. Fly, Control D. You can see that didn't really leave any real change for anything, right? It just softened the bottom, basically, is all I'm saying. All right. You can also control it more if you want to go to something like the blending tool and go with the soft. You can come in and really just kind of soften that down. Or even go with something like the whitish color on the airbrush. Down below it. Like so. Grab the blender again. Come in and add that directional pull. And just kind of fade this out. There we go. Alright, so let's go over here on this side, take our selection tool, and just kind of think about a broken up more landscape, something like that. I'm going to flatten this out, so I'm going to go click on the rectangle, and I'm going to do subtract. I'm going to bring this up and straighten this until enter. So now it looks like where water will be. I'm going to go back to B. I'm going to stick with my airbrush. Grab this darker color. Come in along the top again. Grab a little bit of that darker color. Bring the opacity up. Okay, something like that. Can zoom in. So I want this to have a little bit of trees to it. I could use my stencils and make it a little bit quicker. That's the main thing with the stencil, is that it just makes your life easier and quicker to do these. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how to do it with the selection tool. And I'm going to make sure I've got add. And I'm just going to come along, and all I'm doing is zigzagging up and down. Trying to stay similar, but not overly concerned. I just want the breakup of this part here. I can even come in and add a few round spots, a few higher ones, a few zigzag ziggles, like so. Space bar, drag over, just up and down, and then kind of down here at the bottom, just break up that shoreline a little bit. Make sure not to disturb too much the bottom. Kind of the same over here. And you just want to keep these fairly vertical. And go back to my brush. Come along just the top here. Control D. And then I can grab a watercolor brush and go with this fan brush, bring the size way down, make sure that I've got it on either smudge or pure pigment, and just kind of come back in through here and smear it around. Turn the water down. Grab this hard one here, bring that way down. Just come along and really kind of push this paint around. That'll give the impression of a tree line off in the distance. I know it looks kind of weird up close, but remember, you're looking at this way closer than any viewers can ever look at it. And just mainly kind of think of some of the shapes and stuff. Again, you tell I'm not putting any detail into any of this. I'm literally just smearing it around randomly. And using those peaks and valleys that I made to help decide where some of the other trees and shrubs and bushes and all that kind of go. There we go. Alright, so now I can grab my selection tool again and come through here, staying in the dark area as close as I can, ignoring the trees. I want to go below those. Come around, let's go to filter, let's go to Gaussian, bring that up. Apply. Too much. So let's just do it the old-fashioned way. Let's go with, oops, not water. Soft. Like so. Grab a little bit of the paint. We'll go with the flat wash. Bring that size way down. Four. Just trying to break up some of this a little bit. Control D. And I'm going to go back to the selection tool, square, bring that up, and delete it. Control D. Brush 4. Bring the opacity way down. So all I'm trying to do is just get a little bit of variation over here. And this over here I don't really care about. We're about to cover that up as well. Keeping an eye on some of that just to make sure this down here below it is dry so it won't run into it as much. Just again breaking up some of that space, letting it diffuse out. So we're able to keep that watercolor feel, but really control it. There we go. And then hit fast dry when I think it's at a point that I like. Okay. So that really helped bring that forward because we've got the stuff up here around it where you see like the hint of trees, but back here we don't. And then we've got this space between it. So let's come back to our selection tool. And we're going to do that again. And this is why I didn't really care about that hard edge there. Got the subtract. Bring our rectangle up to the edge of that little space right over here. Hit enter. Oops, I hit delete by accident. I didn't mean to do that. Not that it overly matters, but you know. Still on this darker one, we're going to grab our watercolor. Let's go with liner and opacity all the way. Bring the water down. That kind of a feel. D. Come back here and add a little bit to it too. That kind of seep around. Not worrying about this down here yet. Control D. Again. Now we've got that kind of really blended in there. Bring the water down. Press 4. Really just kind of help these to kind of soften out a little bit. Go along the bottom, do the same. Okay. Again, same kind of thing. Let's go to our selection tool. Come in here. Kind of add some shapes. I'm going to zoom in. Now in this, I'm going to not only do, I'm going to select, make sure I've got add to on here, but I'm going to come up like so. And now I'm going to kind of zigzag back and forth, working down and then working up. Come over, zigzag back and forth. Like so. I want a few taller trees here and there. Bring that over. Zigzag back and forth. Starting at the top, zigzagging your way down. And back up. And we'll just grab the airbrush. That darker color. Just because it's a little bit quicker. We can even come in with just the airbrush. Break up some of these edges here and there. Hit the period button. And that's going to show us some of those darker spots as well. We'll go with the liner brush. Let's make sure our water's down all the way. Okay. And again, just kind of bring in like so. All right. So that gives us that. And then over here, I'm going to make one more thing, but I want to show you what it looks like with the stencils. So let's come over to the stencils and grab maybe this one. Now for some reason, this stencil should be the reverse of this, but Rebelle brought all these in backwards. So I'm just going to invert it. Right click on it and drag it over. Come to this little X right here and move it down. And put it right about here. Go to my airbrush. Bring my size up. And again, this you can do on a separate layer if you want to be able to move this around. And I need to go a little bit darker on this because it's really here in the foreground. Okay. I can grab this one. Again, come up here, invert. Like I said, I don't know why it's done that. Get down. Look at where it's lining up. Overlap it just a little bit. Right click on this one and just hit backspace and it hides it. want this to kind of come out over here, like so. And I'm going to flip vertical and bring it up so that that's kind of in between the two, kind of similar to there. And just going up and down. Like so. Right click, hide. Now if you come back over here and look, you can see if I click on this one, I can then go to flip vertical, drag it down so that it kind of meets up. Push 4, still going vertical. You want to keep this up and down. Okay. And I'm going to come over here to the watercolor again. I'm going to grab my fan, go to properties, blending, up in size. Just kind of rough this up a little bit. Bring it over. And then just kind of horizontal back and forth. Kind of like that. And we can really kind of obliterate it. Drag some of this lighter color over. Really, I'm not dragging the lighter color over. I'm thinning out the pigment that's on here by dragging it around. Try and keep these fairly horizontal. Like so. Okay. So we've got those there. Now I think down in through here, I want to do some weeds and some grass and that kind of stuff. So we're going to do those here in just a second. I am going to put those on a new layer. All right. And I'm going to also duplicate this layer, drag it up between the new layer I just made, press T, going to do flip vertical, hold shift and drag it down, kind of match it up with the shoreline, press enter. Let's put it below that, this right here. Okay. I'm going to zoom out, bring this up here and press T, drag that over, kind of like that. And I'm going to grab perspective, like that. Enter, press T one more time, stretch this down. Something along those lines. Now I'm going to come back to my fan brush, still on blend, and I'm going to again just kind of come back and forth. The flatter these are, the more still the water is going to look. So use your whole arm to kind of bring these around. just want to kind of reflect some of the stuff that we see in the above. That is a little too big. Okay. So why use this one? I mean, we've got that grain issue again. Now I kind of want that. And this is just back and forth. And I kind of want it because it gives a little bit more organic feel. Alright. Now I'm going to filter, Gaussian blur, bring that down. So now I've got that streak, but it's not super in your face. Alright, so now the next thing I want to do is I want to come to here, select a circle, go back up to this top layer that I have here. Well, actually, maybe before I do the circle, let's come into that soft orange that we had previously. This one. Let's go with the airbrush a little bit. Let's put some of that orange in the sky. This is going to kind of be on top of all this. And down in the water. I'm doing it on top because it won't really overly show on these up here. Let's go with liner 2, no water. Just kind of streak in some of these clouds. Then press 4. Kind of like so. Bring this around a little bit. Kind of like so. We may play around with the layer adjustment as well. I'm going to make a new layer here. Now I'm going to come to this circle. Press Shift so it stays a circle. I'm going to go ahead and do it this big, but we're not going to leave it that big. I'm going to press Enter. And I'm going to go with this. Let's just click whatever the default yellow here is. Bring that way down. We can just color fill. Okay. And then let's do Control D. Filter. Gaussian. Something about like 42 or 40 maybe. Apply. And I'm going to select my circle again. Shift. Smaller one. Drag it around to where I kind of think it's in the middle. And let's bring this down to where it's almost completely white. remember, if we want it completely white, 255 for all of these is. Alright. It doesn't really matter which one we use here, so we'll just kind of do that. Control D, T. Put that about where we like it. Hit Enter. And now I'm going to come over here to paintbrush. Just go with gouache, I guess. Gouache liner 2. Zoom in. Press 5. Across. What we're doing is we're just kind of eating away at this to put some of the clouds in there. Press 4. Really kind of soften it. Drag that glow out. Go from the center out. Don't get rid of the entire circle. Leave the circle. At least the top of it. We just want a few wisps of clouds to kind of come across. And then same up here with this, just kind of smear it over. Like so. Zoom it back out. Now let's grab a rectangle. Come up here to the edge of the circle. Like so. And release. And then come down. So that we're still at that edge. Hit Enter. Now let's take our, grab that light yellow. Shift Control I, so we invert it. Grab that yellow, come straight down the middle. So we have some of that. Control D. Blend, and then just kind of blend those together. Press 1. Again, come down the middle. That's going to give us that really nice reflection. We'll go back to this gouache. Just come back and forth. Okay, now there's another stencil I really like using for this to make my life easier. Where is it? I think I've imported it. Maybe not. So give me 1 sec. So there's this water ripple one that I like to use. Right click on it, bring it down. Click on this, hold Shift, stretch it out. Now go back to something like the liner 4. Just kind of streak it back and forth. You can even go invert. Like so. Then invert. And if you want to bring that reflection down again this way. It helps break it up. And then just kind of back and forth again. And so it kind of just helps bring that in. Again, you can do this all by hand. Totally up to you. Stencils are just there again to help save time. I'll press 1, bring this line kind of over. And I can also use the selection tool. And then you can unselect some of it. Like so. Come in with the airbrush. I'm going to do this one, do it the right way. Select these. Come down and around again. Press T. Stretch it. Make sure you line up this with this. And zoom it out a little bit. Kind of like that. Okay. You can also do the shift, come across, shift, come across, and it'll snap kind of into a horizontal. And Control D. And now let's come into here. I like using either the watercolor liner or going over to the pen tool and using either one of these through here, making sure that I have no water. Come onto a new layer and going with this darker color here. Just kind of bring in some of these. Change up the size a little bit. This will kind of help set your picture, set your painting. And then on some of these larger ones, if you want to come in, you can add a few extra grass bits. You can even throw an oval on occasion. Make a cattail. So again, totally up to you how much grass and so forth. I've even got one that is a seagrass. Kind of a stencil. This was actually created from a photo that I did, that I took. If we want to bring it down, again, invert it. Not sure why Rebelle has had this issue. But if I really want to add in some quick grass, break all that up. And drag it around a little bit. Can be a good way to add some interest. And if there's any of it you don't like say you grab some of this through here and you're like, I don't really care for that, which I kind of don't. Just grab your selection tool, kind of come down through here, keep what you want to keep. And delete what you don't. This is some of the coolest stuff about digital painting. I don't have to go necessarily back over and repaint over all this stuff. I can just kind of edit out what I don't like. It gives me plenty of ability to try stuff. So all I'm doing here is adding in a few extra twigs by using my stencil. And just making an eye stop. Like that. And again, you can just build it up as much as you want or as little as you want. And just by moving stencils around and playing around, you get a lot more interest. See? Now you have something that kind of lands this here. It makes you feel like you're stepping into the scene a little more. Just like that. grab this here. I'm going to select this, grab this, Control C, Control V, flip vertical, Control D, or Enter, I mean, then Control D. Paintbrush, gouache, smudge, just trying to soften this a little bit. I just want to have this hint of this reflection here. Something like that. And something like that. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take all of this, oops, merge them. Did not mean to click duplicate. Merge. Make a new layer. Turn off pigment. Go with overlay. Bring in some of this color. To kind of punch it up a little bit. I pull everything together some. There we go. Just trying to add a little bit of extra glow here and there. This will help just kind of tie and pull everything together a little bit. Just like that. And let's do another one with multiply. A little bit of this blue. Just kind of bring it in some of these. To add a little bit of change to some of it, and then press 4 and just kind of blend it around. It's just adding a little bit of blue saturation to it. Makes it a bit more interesting. Okay. And we'll add a little bit up here in the sky. Four. Bring that up in size a little bit. Press 4. Just kind of blend that across. Press 1. Just again, kind of come in from the sides. Press 4. I think that's going to help kind of bring some of the clouds and the watery look together. Drop down here. All right. Let's put a little bit more of a glow. Just a little softening. Maybe add just a little bit more of a glow up here. Again, pretty subtle, because we're just lightly adding in some light to it. Lightly adding light. Anyway, you know what I mean. And then from here, it really is a matter of just kind of picking and choosing where you want to add highlights, where you want to add in some more movement, like if you wanted to maybe add in, and we'll do this on a separate layer. Let's say, for example, you want to add in birds. Then you definitely could. I like to maybe push those back a little bit. Something like that. Kind of looking like bats, but anyway. Something along those lines. So you can play around with it as much as you want, add in as much as you want, but hopefully this gives you a good idea of how to use the different tools and go through the steps. So I guess that's pretty much it. I'll see you on the next one.